except for the cerebrum and cerebellum. They've been removed. The two cerebral hemispheres have been removed. The cerebellum has been removed. That's what's left. Okay, so what's left? The diencephalon and the brainstem.
So that whole thing on top is the
Yeah,
diencephalon.
I'm gripping this model by the diencephalon. Now gripping the model by the brainstem. Okay? So this is diencephalon and brainstem. So is that where we are now, the objectives?
Yeah, so I'm looking for, like thalamus. So they said that, like, I don't know.
Well, oh, you want thalamus? See this weirdly shaped yo-yo-like structure?
Yeah.
That's the thalamus.
Like these.
This is so the thalamus is the biggest part. It contributes the most mass to the diencephalon.
Okay.
So I'm gripping the thalamus part of the diencephalon here. Okay?
So this like whole.
This whole bulge, that whole bulge, and the connecting commissure that joins them. That's the intermediate mass of the thalamus, also called the interthalamic adhesion.
That little yellow dot.
Yeah, so that's a bundle of axons crossing the midline. It's a commissure connecting the two sides of the thalamus to one another. So it's thalamus also. Okay?
Is that the solid structure that was a hole in the other model?
Yes, exactly right. That's on the ventricles model, that gray ventricles model. That's exactly right. So the interthalamic adhesion or intermediate mass is a stalk, a bundle of axons connecting two sides of the thalamus, and it runs through the third ventricle.
Okay.
So it's represented by a hole on the gray ventricles model. Okay. So let's take a look at our list here. Epithalamus, which consists of the habenula and the pineal body. So to see that, we have to pull it apart.
Okay.
So this shallow space in here, this is called the third ventricle.
Okay.
This space up here, this is the right lateral ventricle. So there are four. So we already did the ventricles with the gray plastic model. Did you go over with me? Not yet. Well, in any event, this space in here is the right lateral ventricle. The shallow space in here is the third ventricle. There's the cerebral aqueduct. Fourth ventricle would be here. You would have the cerebellum behind it. There we see the central canal of the spinal cord. So all those areas would contain CSF. Now for the epithalamus and then its component parts, the habenule and pineal body, this entire pink object is the epithalamus.
Just that little
right there.
pink.
Just that pink structure, but the complete pink structure is the epithalamus. So what part of it is pineal? What part of it is habenula? See the inferior bulge? That's the pineal body.
Okay.
Right there. So that's an endocrine structure. It produces the hormone melatonin. The less light we're exposed to, the more melatonin it produces. So light actually has an inhibitory effect on the pineal body. So the pink that extends from the pineal body, the rest of the epithalamus, that's the habenula.
Okay.
The habenula is a sensory tract, is a sensory pathway tract. Specifically, it's one of the olfactory pathways. One of these, there are several sense of smell pathways. And the habenula is one of the olfactory or sense of smell pathways.
When it's cut in half like that, like
Pardon?
when it's cut in half like that, will we have to say like this is the right side of?
This is actually right on. This is really right on the midline.
Okay,
here.
so there's only like
Yeah,
one.
yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So just saying. The
But I tell you what,
hypothalamus.
you know what? To err on the side of caution, since this is the right half of the model, just be on the safe side. Right for everything here. And if it doesn't apply, I would ignore it.
Okay.
But if right does apply and you don't include it, that I won't ignore, as you well know from Practical 1. Okay? So on the side of caution, if it's the right half of something, every object you should put an R in front of, just be on the safe side. Okay? Now, what else do we have here?
Infundibulum?
Infundibulum. This particular half doesn't show it, nor does this half. Interesting. Do we have another one like this that nobody is using? Look around you.
There's one down here.
one other
I got
one.
one.
see where it used to be. There's a hole there now. That one's got an infundibulum. Okay. So, first of all, this pink bean here, that's supposed to be as if there is the pituitary gland. It's really two structures combined. There's a posterior pituitary gland, there's an anterior pituitary gland. They've got it as if it's one thing. But the point is, the infundibulum is a little pink stalk in here, and it leads directly to the posterior pituitary. It joins just to the posterior, not to the anterior. Okay? So infundibulum connects to posterior pituitary. So you notice where posterior pituitary is listed? Under what heading?
Oh, I'm supposed to be under hypothalamus.
It's supposed to be under hypothalamus, exactly. Infundibulum and posterior pituitary are parts of the hypothalamus, of the diencephalon. What do we have next?
And is the mammillary body also part of the hypothalamus?
The mammillary bodies are also part of the hypothalamus. So here we see this little white bulge. That's the left mammillary body. Find the right one.
Here?
Correct. There is the right mammillary body. So they are a pair of interior bulges on the base of the hypothalamus. So, all right, next.
I think that's, oh, the interthalamic.
Interthalamic adhesion, also known as the intermediate mass.
Oh, right, I saw that.
Here it is.
Yes.
That's
so
part of the
that
thalamus.
Yellow
So
dot.
see this bulge here?
Yeah.
That's thalamus. Intermediate mass or interthalamic adhesion is part of the thalamus that joins the two sides. It joins this to that by running through the third ventricle. Hypothalamus is here. This is specifically hypothalamus, so it's anterior and inferior to the thalamus. So this is anterior direction. So hypothalamus is both anterior and inferior to the thalamus. And then it continues as the mammillary bodies, left and right, as the infundibulum, singular, and as the posterior pituitary, singular. So they made a mistake on this model. This white structure here is called the optic chiasm. I believe that's also.
Yeah, I think it's on there somewhere. I think it's on the
Yeah, it's on one. It's one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't recall exactly which objective it's part of. But in
Okay.
any event, it's worth noting here. Optic chiasm is a midline structure. Chiasm means the center of the X. So you'd have an X shape. The center of the X is right on the midline. That's the optic chiasm. Because you've got a left optic nerve coming in, you've got a right optic nerve coming in, and right in the center where they meet at the midline, they form what's called an optic chiasm. What's important to know, though, is that the infundibulum and posterior pituitary are continuations of the hypothalamus, but the optic chiasm is separate. It's a separate structure altogether. So they made a mistake on the model. They've got the infundibulum way too far forward. So in reality, the infundibulum extends directly from the hypothalamus, so it's extending between the mammillary bodies and the optic chiasm. So right where the tip of the chopstick is, that's the infundibulum leading to the posterior pituitary. So they definitely have it positioned too far forward on this model.
And now, could you just re-explain the, like you were saying about inferior or anterior and
Anterior. The pituitary
hypothalamus?
gland.
No, you.
No, in terms of getting oriented, I'm using
Gotcha,
directional terminology.
okay.
I'm using directional terminology here. So here is thalamus.
Right.
Here is hypothalamus. How is the hypothalamus positioned relative to the thalamus?
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Anterior to it and inferior to it. It's antero-inferior. They actually do a mashup of those two terms. It is antero-inferior to the thalamus. It's anterior to and below at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay? So in other words, if you're told that, if you're given that directional terminology information, it should help you go to it. It should help you find, if you know where the thalamus is,
Right.
you now know which way to go to find the hypothalamus. Okay? Sure.
So is that the anterior pituitary and that's not the posterior pituitary? It's just the one?
Well, actually, no, there is no such thing as a pituitary gland. There is an anterior pituitary gland. There is a posterior pituitary gland. The posterior is brain. The posterior is part of the hypothalamus.
Okay.
The anterior is the true gland, strictly hormonal production.
Got it.
But they're joined by connective tissue, and they share a capillary network. So the hormones they produce actually do influence each other
So they-
by way of the capillaries.
Bloodstream. Through the blood?
Yeah,
Blood.
exactly. All hormones are secreted into the bloodstream by definition.
Yes.
A hormone is considered a circulating ligand. You know what a ligand is?
Binds to a
L-I-G-A-N-D.
protein that causes a protein channel to open.
A ligand is it's even broader than that. A ligand is any molecule that binds to any protein receptor. It's a very broad term. So neurotransmitters are ligands. Hormones are ligands. Hormones are circulating ligands. They get secreted into the bloodstream. They eventually circulate to the target cells and bind to a receptor protein of that target cell. So you'll see the definition in many books. Hormones are defined as circulating ligands. So that's why I say that there's this common capillary network between the anterior and the posterior pituitary. Okay, but the posterior is brain tissue. The anterior is not brain tissue.
Strictly gland. Strictly
It's
gland.
a true gland. It's a true gland, exactly. Yeah. Anything else?
I think that covers it for now.
Covers it? All
You
right.
know, there'll be